Imagine this: a struggling artist, a powerful CEO, and a chance encounter that changes everything. What starts as a clash of two completely different worlds turns into a journey of love, sacrifice, and redemption. But can love truly conquer the barriers of wealth, status, and trust? Stay tuned as we dive into a story that will tug at your heartstrings and leave you believing in the power of second chances. The art gallery buzzed with excitement on opening night. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of her latest painting, nervously adjusting her simple black dress. At 26, this was her first major exhibition, a dream she had chased since graduating from art school. The walls were adorned with her work, vibrant cityscapes that captured both the chaos and beauty of urban life. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, watching as critics and potential buyers wandered through the gallery. Her paintings were her soul laid bare, each brushstroke a piece of her story. The struggling artist in her still couldn't believe she had made it this far. Through the crowd, she thought she spotted a familiar face: Michael, her old mentor from art school. Without thinking, Sarah rushed forward, her heart racing with excitement. In her haste, she didn't notice the tall figure turning around. Before she could stop herself, she leaned in to greet him the way she had learned during her study abroad years in Europe. A light, cheek-to-cheek gesture. But something was off. The man didn't respond the way Michael would have. Instead, he froze, his body stiffening as Sarah's cheek brushed his. She pulled back, confused, and her heart sank when she realized her mistake. The man standing before her wasn't Michael. He was a complete stranger. Sarah's face turned crimson. "Oh my God," she stammered, stepping back. "I am so sorry. I thought you were someone else." The stranger blinked, clearly startled. But then his expression softened into a bemused smile. He was tall, with sharp features and steel-gray eyes that seemed to glint under the gallery lights. His tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly, exuding an air of quiet confidence. "Well," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "that's certainly a unique way to introduce yourself." Sarah wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. "I was trying to greet my old mentor, European style. I mean, not that I go around pressing my cheek to strangers. Oh God, I'm making this worse." The man chuckled, and Sarah noticed several heads turning their way. "I'm Alexander Sterling," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Though I usually prefer a handshake before any kind of close contact." Sarah reluctantly shook his hand, still mortified. "Sarah Mitchell. And I usually prefer proper introductions before any kind of interaction." "Sarah Mitchell?" His eyebrows rose with interest. "The artist?" She nodded, wishing she could disappear into one of her paintings. "Yes, that would be me, when I'm not assaulting strangers with unexpected greetings." Alexander's eyes traveled to the painting behind her, a massive canvas depicting a sunset over the city, where modern skyscrapers blended seamlessly with old architecture. "Your work is extraordinary," he said, and something in his tone made her believe he meant it. "Thank you," she managed, trying to regain her composure. "Are you interested in art?" "I'm interested in many things," he replied cryptically, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I just became very interested in this exhibition." Before Sarah could respond, her gallery manager approached, practically buzzing with excitement. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Sterling, I see you've met our most distinguished guest of the evening." Sarah frowned, confused. "Distinguished guest?" The manager looked between them, beaming. "Mr. Sterling is one of the most prominent collectors in the city. His technology company, Sterling Innovations, has one of the largest private art collections in the country." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had just accidentally greeted one of the most influential people in the art world in the most awkward way possible. Her career was probably over before it had even properly begun. But Alexander Sterling was still smiling, his gray eyes twinkling with amusement. "I think," he said, "we've had quite an unconventional introduction. Perhaps we could start over. I'd love to hear about your inspiration for these pieces. Sarah took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. She was a professional, after all. One mortifying mistake didn't have to define the evening. Of course, she said, managing a small smile. Where would you like to begin? As she began to explain her work, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this mistake might lead to something unexpected. She didn't know whether to be thrilled or terrified by that thought. The evening continued with a surprising ease that Sarah hadn't expected. Despite her initial embarrassment, Alexander, or Alex as he insisted she call him, seemed genuinely interested in her work. They moved from painting to painting, and Sarah found herself explaining the stories behind each piece. She spoke about her love for the city, how its chaos and beauty inspired her, and how she tried to capture fleeting moments of connection in her art. Alex listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions. His demeanor was calm and composed, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes that made Sarah feel like he wasn't just being polite. He was truly paying attention. So, this one, Alex said, stopping in front of a painting of a crowded subway station. The piece was alive with movement, commuters rushing past, a street musician playing his guitar, and a young couple sharing a quiet moment amidst the chaos. What inspired this? Sarah hesitated, feeling a little vulnerable. It's about finding stillness in the middle of the noise, she said softly. I think we all get so caught up in the rush of life that we forget to notice the little moments, the ones that matter. Alex nodded, his gaze lingering on the painting. It's beautiful, he said, his voice low. You have a way of seeing the world that most people miss. Sarah felt a warmth rise in her chest at his words. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially from someone like him. He was polished, confident, and clearly successful, everything she wasn't. And yet, he seemed genuinely interested in her and her work. As the night went on, Sarah began to relax. She even found herself laughing at Alex's dry sense of humor. He had a way of making her feel at ease, despite the fact that he was, as her gallery manager had put it, one of the most prominent collectors in the city. By the end of the evening, Sarah was surprised to find that she didn't want the conversation to end. But as the last guests began to leave, Alex glanced at his watch and sighed. I suppose I should let you get some rest, he said. It's been a long night. Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling a little disappointed. Thank you for coming, she said, and for not holding my awkward introduction against me. Alex smiled, his gray eyes twinkling. I think it was the most memorable introduction I've ever had, he said. I'll be in touch, Sarah. I'd like to discuss a commission with you. A commission? Sarah blinked, caught off guard. You mean you want me to paint something for you? Exactly, Alex said. I'll have my assistant reach out to you with the details, but for now, I'll just say that I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work. With that, he gave her a small nod and turned to leave. Sarah watched him go, her mind racing. A commission from someone like Alex Sterling could be a game-changer for her career, but more than that, she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting had been the start of something different. The next morning, Sarah woke up to an email from Alex's assistant. The message was polite and professional, outlining the details of the commission. Alex wanted a large-scale painting for the lobby of his company's headquarters, a piece that would capture the spirit of innovation and creativity. The budget was generous and the timeline was flexible. Sarah stared at the email, her heart pounding. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of, but it also felt intimidating. Could she really create something that would live up to Alex's expectations? She spent the next few days sketching ideas and gathering inspiration. She visited the city's tech district, observing the sleek architecture and the energy of the people who worked there. She wanted the painting to reflect not just the physical space, but the sense of possibility that came with it. As she worked, Sarah found herself thinking about Alex more than she cared to admit. There was something about him that intrigued her. He was confident but not arrogant, charming but not overbearing, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel like he wasn't just another wealthy collector looking to add to his portfolio. A week later, Alex showed up at her studio unannounced. Sarah was in the middle of painting, her hair tied back in a messy bun and her hands covered in paint. She looked up, startled, as he stepped through the door. "Sorry for dropping by uninvited," Alex said, holding up a cup of coffee as a peace offering. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd see how the project was coming along." Sarah blinked, still processing his sudden appearance. "Oh, it's fine," she said, setting down her brush. "I wasn't expecting you, but come in." Alex stepped inside, glancing around the small studio. The walls were lined with canvases, some finished, some still in progress. A faint smell of turpentine hung in the air, mingling with the aroma of the coffee he had brought. "This is impressive," Alex said, his eyes scanning the room. "It's one thing to see your work in a gallery, but seeing where it's created, it's a whole different experience." Sarah felt a blush creep up her neck. "It's not much," she said, gesturing to the cluttered space. "But it works for me." Alex walked over to the easel where her latest painting was taking shape. It was a rough sketch of the city's tech district, with bold lines and vibrant colors that hinted at the final piece. "This is incredible," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've captured the energy of the place perfectly." "Thanks," Sarah said, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "It's still a work in progress, but I'm glad you like it." Alex turned to her, his expression serious. "I don't just like it, Sarah. I think it's going to be amazing." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. There was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. "Anyway," Alex said, breaking the moment, "I should let you get back to work. I just wanted to check in and see how things were going." "Thanks for stopping by," Sarah said, her voice softer than she intended. "And for the coffee." Alex smiled, his gray eyes twinkling. "Anytime." As he left, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what exactly was happening between them. Was this just a professional relationship, or was there something more? She didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Alex Sterling was quickly becoming a bigger part of her life than she had ever expected. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Sarah. Between working on Alex's commission and juggling her other projects, her days were long and exhausting. But there was a strange sense of fulfillment in the chaos. Every time she worked on the painting for Alex, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just another job. It was a chance to create something meaningful. Alex, true to his word, stayed involved in the process. He would occasionally drop by her studio, always unannounced, with coffee in hand and a curious smile on his face. Their conversations grew more personal with each visit. He told her about his childhood, how he had grown up in a small town before building his tech empire from scratch. Sarah, in turn, shared stories about her family, especially her younger brother Nathan, who was studying art in college and looked up to her as his role model. Despite their growing connection, Sarah couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of unease. Alex was kind, attentive, and supportive, but there was a part of his world that felt completely foreign to her. He lived in a world of luxury and power, while she was still struggling to make ends meet. It was hard to imagine how someone like him could truly understand her life. That unease turned into something more tangible one afternoon, when Sarah received a call from her landlord. The building that housed her studio, along with several other small businesses and artist spaces, had been sold to a development company. They were being evicted, effective in 3 months. Sarah's heart sank as she hung up the phone. The studio wasn't just a workspace, it was her sanctuary, the place where she felt most herself. Losing it would be devastating, and she had no idea where she would go. Later that evening, as she sat in her studio trying to process the news, Alex arrived. He immediately noticed her distress. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, setting down the coffee he had brought for her. She hesitated, unsure if she should tell him, but the concern in his eyes made her feel like she could trust him. "The building's been sold," she said finally. "I have to move out in 3 months. I don't know where I'm going to go." Alex frowned, his expression thoughtful. "Do you know who bought it?" Sarah shook her head. "Some development company. They're probably going to tear it down and build condos or something." Alex's face darkened, and for a moment he looked almost guilty. "Sarah, I think I know who bought it." Her stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, his voice steady but cautious. "The building was purchased by one of my subsidiaries. It's part of a larger project we've been working on to revitalize the area." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. "You're the one who's evicting us?" "It's not that simple," Alex said quickly. "The project is meant to bring new opportunities to the neighborhood. We're creating jobs, building affordable housing." "Affordable housing?" Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. "You're tearing down people's livelihoods to build condos and call it progress?" Alex looked genuinely pained. "I didn't know your studio was in this building. If I had, I would have—" "You would have what?" Sarah snapped. "Stopped the project? Changed your mind? Let me guess, this is just business to you, right? Numbers on a spreadsheet?" "That's not fair," Alex said, his tone firm but calm. "I care about this neighborhood. That's why I started the project in the first place, but I can't make decisions based on personal relationships." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to believe him, but the reality of the situation was too overwhelming. "You don't get it, Alex," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't just a building to me. It's my home. It's where I create, where I feel like I belong. And now it's being taken away because of you." Alex reached out as if to comfort her, but she stepped back. "I need some time to think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just go." He hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but he respected her request. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said softly before turning and walking out the door. The days that followed were some of the hardest Sarah had faced in years. She threw herself into her work, trying to finish Alex's commission while avoiding any contact with him. Her emotions were a tangled mess of anger, disappointment, and something she couldn't quite name. She hated the idea of losing her studio, but what hurt even more was the thought that Alex had been the one to take it away. Nathan, her younger brother, noticed her distress during one of his visits. "You've been quiet lately," he said, sitting on the floor of her studio as she worked. "What's going on?" Sarah hesitated, unsure if she should burden him with her problems, but Nathan had always been her confidant, and she needed someone to talk to. She explained the situation, from the eviction notice to her falling out with Alex. Nathan listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "It sounds like he didn't know," he said finally. "And it sounds like he cares about you." Sarah sighed, setting down her brush. "Maybe, but it doesn't change the fact that he's part of the problem. He's the one with all the power, and I'm just me." Nathan gave her a small smile. "You're not just you, Sarah. You're the most talented, determined person I know, and if he can't see that, then he's the one missing out." His words gave her a small sense of comfort, but they didn't solve the problem. She still had to figure out what to do about her studio, and she still had to decide how she felt about Alex. The days stretched into weeks, and Sarah tried her best to focus on her work. She poured all her emotions, her frustration, her sadness, and even her lingering feelings for Alex, into the painting she was creating for him. The piece was coming together beautifully, but every brushstroke felt bittersweet. She couldn't stop thinking about their last conversation, the look in his eyes when he had apologized and the way he had walked out of her studio, leaving her feeling both angry and conflicted. One afternoon, as Sarah was putting the finishing touches on the painting, there was a knock at her studio door. She froze, her heart racing. She hadn't seen Alex since their argument, and part of her hoped it wasn't him. But when she opened the door, there he was, standing there with a hesitant expression and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Hi, Alex said softly, his usual confidence replaced with something more vulnerable. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I wanted to talk. Sarah crossed her arms, unsure how to respond. I'm busy, she said, though her voice lacked the sharpness she had intended. I won't take up much of your time, Alex said, stepping inside before she could stop him. He held out the flowers awkwardly. These are for you. I know they're not much, but I thought you might like them. Sarah stared at the bouquet, her resolve softening despite herself. She took the flowers and set them on a nearby table, avoiding his gaze. What do you want, Alex? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how this building isn't just a place to you, it's your home. And you're right, I didn't understand that before, but I do now. Sarah raised an eyebrow, skeptical. And what exactly are you planning to do about it? Because as far as I know, the eviction notice still stands. Alex nodded, his expression serious. I can't undo the sale of the building, Sarah, but I've been working on a solution. I've spoken to my team, and we're going to set aside part of the development for artists and small businesses. It won't be the same as it is now, but it'll be a space where people like you can continue to create. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. You're doing that? For me? For you, and for everyone else who's been affected by this, Alex said. I know it's not perfect, but it's the best I can do, and I hope it's enough to show you that I care. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt she had felt when she first found out about the eviction, but the sincerity in Alex's voice made it hard to keep her walls up. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Alex hesitated, his gray eyes meeting hers. Because I care about you, Sarah, more than I probably should, and because I don't want to be the reason you lose something that matters so much to you. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let herself trust him again. But another part of her was still afraid. Afraid of getting hurt. Afraid of letting someone like Alex into her life. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Not yet. Alex nodded, his expression somber but understanding. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sarah. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying, and that I'll keep trying for as long as it takes. With that, he turned and left, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She stared at the flowers he had brought, their bright colors a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself thinking about Alex more and more. She couldn't deny that his actions had made a difference. The new plan for the development wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. And the fact that he had gone out of his way to make it happen meant something. Nathan, ever the voice of reason, encouraged her to give Alex another chance. He's trying, Sarah, he said one evening as they sat in her studio. And honestly, it sounds like he really cares about you. Maybe you should hear him out. Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready to let Alex back into her life, but she couldn't ignore the way her heart fluttered every time she thought about him. So when he called a few days later and asked if they could meet, she agreed. They met at a small cafe near the park, a quiet place where they could talk without distractions. Alex was already waiting when Sarah arrived, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair for her. Thanks for coming, he said, his voice soft. Sarah nodded, sitting down across from him. I'm still not sure why I'm here, she admitted. Alex smiled faintly. Because you're curious? And because, deep down, you know I'm not the villain you've made me out to be. Sarah couldn't help but smile at his honesty. You're not making this easy, you know. I'm not trying to, Alex said, his tone serious. I just want to be honest with you, Sarah. I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you. But I also know that I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you." Sarah looked at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, to let herself trust him again, but she also knew that it wouldn't be easy. "This isn't just about me, Alex," she said. "It's about the people in this building, the people who are losing their homes and their businesses. If you really care, you'll do more than just make promises. You'll take action." Alex nodded, his expression resolute. "I will. I promise." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she was willing to take a chance. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's see where this goes." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. True to his word, Alex began taking action to address the concerns of the artists and small business owners in the building. He held meetings with his development team, reworking the plans for the project to include affordable studio spaces, a community arts center, and even a gallery where local artists could showcase their work. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a significant step forward, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for his determination. Despite the progress, Sarah still struggled with her feelings. She appreciated Alex's efforts, but the hurt and mistrust lingered. She threw herself into her work, determined to finish the painting for his company. The piece had become more than just a commission. It was a reflection of everything she had been through, a testament to her resilience and creativity. One evening, as Sarah was putting the final touches on the painting, Nathan burst into her studio, his face pale and his hands trembling. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking. "It's Mom. She's in the hospital." Sarah's heart dropped. Their mother had been battling a chronic illness for years, but she had always been strong, always fought through the worst of it. "What happened?" Sarah asked, grabbing her coat and rushing to Nathan's side. "He collapsed," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "The doctors said it's serious. They're running tests now." The next few hours were a blur. Sarah and Nathan sat in the hospital waiting room, their hands clasped tightly together as they waited for news. When the doctor finally came out, his expression was grave. "Your mother's condition has worsened," he said gently. "She needs surgery, but it's expensive. I'm afraid your insurance won't cover the full cost." Sarah felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. The surgery was their mother's only chance, but the cost was astronomical. She didn't know how they would manage it. Nathan looked at her, his eyes filled with desperation. "What are we going to do, Sarah?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But we'll figure something out. We have to." The next day, Sarah sat in her studio, staring at the nearly finished painting. Her mind was racing, trying to come up with a solution. She could sell some of her work, but it wouldn't be enough. She could take out a loan, but she didn't have the credit to qualify for the amount they needed. She felt trapped, helpless. As she sat there, her phone buzzed. It was Alex. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hi," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Sarah, is everything okay?" Alex asked, his tone filled with concern. "You sound off." She hesitated, unsure if she should tell him, but something in his voice made her feel like she could trust him. "It's my mom," she said finally. "She's in the hospital. She needs surgery, but we can't afford it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "How much do you need?" Alex asked. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "How much do you need for the surgery?" he repeated. "I'll cover it." "No," Sarah said quickly, shaking her head even though he couldn't see her. "Can't let you do that. It's too much." "Sarah," Alex said firmly, "this isn't about money. It's about helping someone you love. Please, let me do this." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She wanted to say no, to refuse his help, but the thought of losing her mother was too much to bear. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." The surgery was scheduled for the following day, and Alex insisted on being there with Sarah and Nathan. He sat with them in the waiting room, offering quiet support as they waited for news. When the doctor finally came out and told them the surgery had been a success, Sarah felt a wave of relief so powerful it brought her to tears. "Thank you," she said to Alex, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't have to," Alex said softly. "I'm just glad I could help." In that moment, Sarah saw a side of Alex she hadn't fully understood before. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman or a charming collector. He was someone who cared deeply, someone who was willing to go out of his way to help the people he cared about. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. A few days later, Sarah finally finished the painting for Alex's company. It was her best work yet, a vibrant, dynamic piece that captured the spirit of innovation and creativity. When Alex came to pick it up, he was speechless. "This is incredible," he said, his gray eyes wide with admiration. "You've outdone yourself, Sarah." "Thank you," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad you like it." "I don't just like it," Alex said, his voice filled with emotion. "I love it. It's perfect." As they stood there, admiring the painting, Alex turned to her, his expression serious. "Sarah, I know things between us have been complicated, and I know I've made mistakes, but I want you to know that I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." Sarah looked at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, to let herself trust him again, but she also knew that it wouldn't be easy. "I care about you too, Alex," she said softly, "but this isn't just about us. It's about everything that's happened, everything we've been through. If we're going to make this work, we have to be honest with each other. No more secrets, no more half-truths." Alex nodded, his expression resolute. "I promise, Sarah. No more secrets, no more half-truths, just us." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she was willing to take a chance. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's see where this goes." The weeks that followed were a turning point for Sarah and Alex. With the painting now proudly displayed in the lobby of Sterling Innovations, Sarah's career began to take off. The exposure brought new opportunities, commissions, gallery invitations, and even interviews with local media. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was finally being recognized for her talent. But it wasn't just her career that was changing. Her relationship with Alex had grown stronger, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He continued to work on the redevelopment project, ensuring that the new spaces for artists and small businesses were not just an afterthought, but a central part of the plan. Sarah saw firsthand how much effort he was putting into making things right, and it softened the last remnants of doubt she had about him. One evening, Alex invited Sarah to the site of the redevelopment project. The old building had been partially demolished, but the framework for the new community arts center was already taking shape. As they walked through the construction site, Alex explained his vision. "This isn't just about building something new," he said, gesturing to the open space around them. "It's about preserving what makes this neighborhood special. I want this to be a place where people like you can thrive, where creativity and innovation can coexist." Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "You've really done it," she said softly. "You've turned something that could have been a disaster into something meaningful." Alex smiled, his gray eyes warm. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've inspired me in ways I didn't think were possible." They stopped in the middle of what would soon be the main gallery space. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the site, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Alex turned to Sarah, taking her hands in his. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "meeting you changed my life. You've shown me a different way of seeing the world, a way that's not just about numbers and profits, but about people and passion. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, the diamond catching the last rays of sunlight. I know this might seem sudden, Alex continued, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at the man standing before her. She thought about everything they had been through, the misunderstandings, the conflicts, the moments of doubt, and realized that it had all led to this moment. Alex wasn't perfect, but neither was she. What mattered was that they had found each other and were willing to fight for what they had. Yes, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. Alex's face lit up with a smile, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the sun dipped below the horizon. In that moment, Sarah felt a sense of peace and happiness she hadn't known was possible. The wedding was a small, intimate affair held in the newly completed Community Art Center. Friends, family, and members of the local art community gathered to celebrate the union of two people who had come from such different worlds but had found a way to bridge the gap between them. Nathan, ever the supportive younger brother, gave a heartfelt speech during the reception. Sarah has always been my hero, he said, raising his glass. She's taught me that no matter how hard life gets, you can always find beauty in the chaos. And Alex, thank you for seeing that beauty in her and for being the kind of person who's willing to fight for what's right. To Sarah and Alex. The room erupted in applause, and Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at her brother. She had always tried to be strong for him, but in that moment she realized how much he had been her strength as well. As the night went on, Sarah and Alex danced together under the soft glow of string lights. The art center, now filled with laughter and music, felt like a symbol of everything they had overcome. It wasn't just a building, it was a testament to their journey, a place where their love had truly taken root. I can't believe this is real, Sarah said, resting her head on Alex's shoulder as they swayed to the music. It's real, Alex said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. And it's just the beginning. In the months that followed, Sarah and Alex worked together to make the Community Art Center a success. Sarah became its creative director, curating exhibitions and organizing workshops for local artists. Alex continued to support the project, balancing his responsibilities as a CEO with his newfound passion for giving back to the community. Their life wasn't perfect. There were challenges and disagreements, as there always are in any relationship. But they faced them together, knowing that their love was strong enough to weather whatever came their way. For Sarah, the journey had been anything but easy. She had started out as a struggling artist, unsure of her place in the world, but through her art, her resilience, and her connection with Alex, she had found not only success, but also a sense of belonging. And in Alex, she had found a partner who saw her for who she truly was, and loved her all the more for it. As she stood in the gallery one evening, looking at a painting she had just finished, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had a way of surprising her, of taking her down paths she never could have imagined, and though the road had been rocky, it had led her to a place she could finally call home. And for that, she was endlessly thankful.